Thank you, Frederic. I'm seeing a spotty Wi-Fi hat right here in the front row, and this is a perfect transition to our next panel, as using an NFT, which enables digital identities. So come on up. We have Kerry Frank is going to be our moderator for this panel here.
Who wants to be in that chair?
Guest appearance. Come on, guys. Okay, so yes, we are going to be talking about NFTs as an enabler to digital identity. And I think what I'll do is I'll give a little bit of a preface to what digital identity is and how you can think about it definitionally. And then we'll kind of break into questions, and it'll be more of a conversation than a pure moderate panelist kind of dynamic. So I think it's really important when you think about digital identity. What digital identity is it's an aggregation of data attributes that make an identity distinguishable in a given context. I personally like using the World Economic Forum's framework, which kind of breaks it down into accumulated, inherent, and assigned. So accumulated would be preferences, behaviors. Inherent might be your eye color or your height. And assigned might be something like sovereign credentials, things that the government gives you, or transcripts through academia. Now, anything that then becomes an extension where it's expressed digitally, that's part of your digital identity. Now, I think what's really important here is that NFTs are a segue into digital identity in Web3. And where that's really important is that it's no longer going to be centralized databases that are gatekeeping data attributes, which is the current paradigm that we have. And instead, it's going to be, the user who is the custodian of their own data, which is kind of what we're doing at Snickerdoodle and building our own data wallet. But with that, let me kind of hand it over to some of my other panelists as to how do you see identity and what are some of the applications for NFTs specifically?
Yeah, so identity-wise, I feel as though NFTs aren't the sort of be-all, end-all, and I see more NFTs as sort of more proof of ownership and more in that world than just going, my identity is an NFT. So I'll break that down a little bit. So imagine you're sitting in your home and you are who you are, that's your identity. The things around you within your home, wherever it is, watches, your bed, and anything it is that you want to own and say that you own, that's what I deem as class as what you would say an NFT is. So I think the next phase that we're really going into is that NFTs have set up a great framework for the beginning of being able to capture what's in our identity. But I think the next phase coming into it is really a little bit more down the SBT route. I feel like there's better and more solutions out there that you could use. But pushing into the next realm of what identity is, we need that sort of center hub where NFTs actually link back to. And how we use that now, you'd say a wallet, for example, would be your way of identifying and proving who you are. But then having some sort of visual representation of that and a central place to access first that lists it. It's like going to OpenSea and seeing what you own, right? It's that concept of this is my ID, but we need to push into that next stage now. And I think this is what's interesting coming up in the NFT space. We've had this massive waves of incredible projects doing loads of different things, and I feel like the next step is really going to be identity to pull that all into one place.
Just wanted to kind of add on that because we said about SBTs, which is soul-based tokens, so almost a new evolution of NFTs where that's being assigned to the individual and they're non-transferable. And when we're talking about NFTs, we're really talking about data on chain. And it's that whole representation, your digital version of your material self. And what does that all contain? Your IRL at the moment and your URL online. How are those all connected together? So when we're looking at some of the applications, you can see that recently in California, a couple of weeks ago, they've passed legislation to be able to say, actually, we're going to accept legal documentations that are on chain. We're open to the possibility of that. So that could be your passport, that could be any form of ID that you've got, that could be your mortgage. It won't be too long before you find that NFTs are, interchangeable with a lot of what we have as legal contracts at the moment, which actually sum up a lot of our identity anyway. So as these things continue to evolve, we're going to see that our chain identity, as it were, and how we sit within that space is going to be a much bigger part of how we participate within the world.
No, I was going to throw a question back to Kerry, I guess. Just in terms of the sort of assigned identities, what are you seeing sort of manifest? Like, is the government get involved in that, or is it third parties that are going to be involved in placing these online?
So that's a great question. I mean, it's going to be a hybrid. Like, you're going to see probably every actor in some way, shape, or form get involved. I think the question becomes, what's the technical architecture? I do understand that this panel is called NFTs as digital identity enablers. However, the ecosystem is a little more complex than that. There are certain use cases. NFTs are very good for digital asset ownership, which I think we've all hit the head on there. SBTs are more for social interactions in which you want that permanence, you want to be able to revoke it. You can use it for certain credentialing, like DeFi KYC might be a really good example of that, where like Binance has actually already started dabbling into that. But where NFTs and SBTs might not be very good are bilateral private disclosures of very sensitive data, and that's closer to the verifiable credential model. I see some nodding in the audience, so some people may be familiar of these 3 different technical architecture capacities to digital identity. But what I think the point of this is, okay, so what organizations might get involved and why? Well, honestly, I think that a bunch of different organizations could get involved because every single credential has its place depending on the technical format. It's just a better question of choosing the correct format such that if it's highly private data, which would be a sovereign identity credential, a passport, you would not want that as an SBT. You definitely would not want that as an NFT. You might want that more as a verifiable credential.
Yeah, I guess the challenge I see is who has like provenance, right, to sort of make these declarative statements. I think there's a great amount of like public data, like mortgages, titles, et cetera, that is all visible already. They seem like great candidates to become part of this ecosystem of identity but then, kind of like I've been griping about POAP for the last few days because it's the most centralized thing in this decentralized world, but is it a necessity, right? Like, and so I guess in the same end, like for identity itself, right, do we have that necessity? I mean, like, I can imagine like governments, when passports went e-passport, et cetera, that's gonna become part of the mix. And I agree, like I think like the biggest trick right now still is like how to secure these assets, right? Like, and put them in a way, like in a public key kind of environment. And I feel like crypto field, NFTs in general, everything feels so complicated still for users that just seems like an impossible morass of like things to try wrap around it.
Well, I do want to add to that. I think there are a lot of people in this space who are trying to create turnkey solutions for that exact problem. Like, I know that at Snickerdoodle, we've been thinking through how do you create turnkey solutions so that governments are quite eager to issue a lot of these credentials, especially like corruption is rampant for certain state bodies, and they want to be able to do beneficiaries in a way that there's an auditable track. Credentialing is one thing that can work for that. It's just that you need the data originator, who is in this case a government. They have to be willing to use this solution, and then you have to make the solution simple, which you're right, it's not currently. But there are going to be more and more identity providers who are going to simplify this so that it becomes a much more approachable prospect.
I think it's important to mention as well that with this talk in particular, near enough the whole of NFT.London, we're still looking at NFTs in a very wrong way. No, it's true.
That's a big declaration,
Yeah,
but
it's true. It's completely wrong how we're looking at them. So right now, it's been a very like front-end experience for anyone early in crypto. I mean, I entered the space in 2017, and even back then, it was very like anarchist, just wanting ownership of something. So we're just seeing that evolution just go into something, and really devs playing around and people tech savvy playing around. But we need to start thinking as NFTs, blockchain, SBTs, all of this jargon that we talk all the time, as the underground plumbing to everything we're building. If you have no deliverable or any different front end that's going to prove some crazy problem in the world and make a solution better from it, and remove the blockchain element from it, you haven't got a business in the first place. So I think the first phase that we need to start going into now, because I feel like back end, it's discovered enough. We have NFTs, we have the basics. We should start running MVPs, we should start pushing data and actually prototype some of this stuff. And let users decide what the next step is. Because right now, we can sit it for years and years, and I appreciate it's like the early days of .com now as well, so this is going to naturally come. But there is no front-end use case right now There's no front, and no one's pushing any front end right now with NFTs being the back end. So I feel like the next wave in everything NFTs, the metaverse spin, everything that really Web3 sort of symbolizes in ownership and being able to own everything you have online, the next step is, first of all, building front end and not having to educate people about these complex onboarding processes. I mean, it's funny when you think about the process for people buying NFTs now. If you've bought them before, it's kind of easy. You just have your OpenSea, you go on there, deposit it from any exchange, and you go from there. But the everyday Joe doesn't give a shit. They want to hit an app, be able to claim it, be able to spend gems, just like they do in Candy Crush, and it just feels so seamless that you wouldn't even know you're buying an NFT. But the thought behind knowing it's yours is what we need to start pushing. So I think there's a lot of front-end elements that now need to start being seen before we can even continue with back-end now.
I was going to say, though, do you guys remember Google Pay when it came out?
Yeah.
And how Google screwed up when you look at when Apple Pay rolled out. What did they do? They're like, oh, and you can use it everywhere right now, right? And it's like, Web3 is like the ultimate BD platform, right? Like you can partner and build on top of like anything, everything, anywhere. And I think to your point about the front end experience, it's actually about the there's no point in having a digital identity or a Web3 identity or whatever it is if you can't use it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and so like what we really need is to be applying the advantage of this into the world, right? Like for it to really be salient.
Yeah. Well, this is where I actually want to say, though, there are people working on the front end, which is what Snickerdoodle is doing exactly. I mean, look, we are a B2B2C play, but we have to spend a lot of time thinking about how do you make the front end accessible and easy so that people understand, okay, great, here is an instrument that I can collect my data in, but in a way that they don't need to understand all the nuances of the technical architecture behind it. They just have to understand this is how I disclose my data to X party if I so choose how to do it. But on the back end, we create a, data privacy first, protocol agnostic data sharing layer that allows these things to happen through consent contracts. So I'm not saying that the front end needs work for sure, but there are a lot of people who are still thinking about the problem on the front end. I think, though, maybe one of the things that we haven't talked about is what are some of the benefits to users? Like, if we're going to talk about front end, what are the benefits that users derive from this kind of model with identity in Web3?
Sure. So I would say that as a starting block is a lot of Web3 gives opportunity to people who might face marginalization because of centralized structures to participate using decentralized methods. And for me, that's the whole part of decentralized identity that has the most amount of value because we see how much people are excluded because of the way that these things are currently operated. However, I would also go on the other side of that when we're looking at the decentralized nature of everything is we're able to do a lot of things at the moment. I'll get quite a far-flung one, but if we're looking at the war with Russia, being able to do an economic warfare with Russia depends on the fact that we have these centralized institutions. If Russia's economy was decentralized, we wouldn't have been able to put sanctions on, the institutions wouldn't have been able to put sanctions on. So therefore, everyone who's part of that centralized structure is then hurt because of it or because that's where their identity is. So there's a lot of opportunity here for people to start thinking about how, from a decentralized point of view, they're able to separate themselves from centralized structures and still potentially be able to participate. Not saying that it's good for, nothing against whether it's right or wrong for being able to do with what's happened from a Russia perspective, but the fact that it's able to happen just shows the fact that there is a centralized body that everybody is forced into participating with, and there is opportunities outside of that for people to participate with decentralized technology.
I think another benefit, I think like kind of what Snickerdoodle does to some degree, I hate the word ownership because I feel like it's like too pregnant a word. Like most people don't really care about it. But there have been trillions of dollars made on our data, right? Like by like 10 companies, and us having the ability to control where that goes, who it goes to, and how much it goes to them for, I think is really important, right? Now I don't know that everyone's going to be able to like monetize, their clickstream or whatever it may be. Maybe, hopefully, right? Like, or would want to, but I think the opportunity to not let somebody gain an advantage because of it, right, I think is powerful. It's an unlock, right? I think and that second part is that if you can participate, this is where you decentralize, like take the Facebook ad engine and say, great, like now like those marketers have to go to every one of those people to actually accrue that value. This is the problem we already saw like manifesting with the like the first party data, the cookie stuff already, right? And so like the only solve for that is actually like Web3, right? Because you basically have to build that relationship now individually with every one of those people to actually say like, I know you, you trust me, and I want to give you this information about me.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
We're still the product. Any dev would understand the back end of like Web 2 and the problems and the sort of the advancement on that side, but like I like to push front end because I mean we're pushing very front end stuff. We've sort of done like 3 years of R&D in the back end, and that is very front end. But it's just simply like the advancements we can make in this space are very look at the problems that we have been dealing with. Why we really all fundamentally care about NFTs. And there is a lot of speculators, there's a lot of, I can earn money in this, I can trade this, fine, there always will be. But the fundamental tech does come down to, we all have a problem with how our data is shared with other people. And we want more control, ownership and governance around how our data is shared with other people.
Yeah, well, and I think, so if you have interest in this as well, beyond what we're saying on stage, there's some really, I would say there's already a lot of really salient research on this exact thing. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the Digital Identity Alliance. To be honest, I know their framework. I don't use them as my own baseline because I consider them too Web 2 friendly, and I think some of the stakeholders who are part of that alliance actually have a incentive to only marginally improve identity, which allows them to continue with specific predatory data sharing business models, but you can look into that. They have the 4 Ps. The other one is self-sovereign identity. Sovereign does a good 12 guiding principles framework that is useful if this is something of interest. And I think I'll just quickly add, I mean, some other things that maybe weren't mentioned are Web3 allows for persistence of data, that data can exist beyond centralized databases. It allows for portability. It allows for data minimization and disclosure and verifiability through like what is blockchain and the fact that it's auditable. So those are like some of the big sells, but maybe someone wants to talk about what some of the less positive sides are to transitioning to Web3, maybe short-term and long-term.
I think short-term, just because we're figuring stuff out, a lot of stuff is going to get persisted that we won't be able to put back in the tube, right? So, you know, as we experiment, you know, you may exhaust a bunch of data about yourself that you can never undo, right? I still think like wallets not being able to like people being able to airdrop things into your wallet that have no association with you can negatively reflect on you. Like I can make you look like a racist, like just by dropping a whole bunch of random crap in your wallet, and then that's on me now to move all my stuff, right? Or you know, and then there's always a record, right? So I still feel like that part is pernicious, and I don't know like that we have a good solution for it yet. I'm hoping like there will be better solutions around this, right? Because I do think like the persistence is a strength and a weakness at the same time, right, to some degree.
I suppose it's what do you not want on the chain? Where do you not want your data to be? Because at the moment, there's a lot of balancing up the idea of anonymity and also being able to have full transparency and trust. And how do you draw those lines from a back user end, from a front user end? How do we know what's being given? And are we able to use it in a way that's meaningful to us? I think that's what it all comes down to. But always asking yourself the question, what data do I not want being shared or in that permanent situation?
I mean, I'm going to add to that. I think a huge caveat to Web3 is that enterprises or individuals might accidentally tokenize data that has no business being tokenized. And once you do that, there's not a lot you can do to rein that in. And so I think this probably also feeds into the fact that we have a literacy issue in Web3, and we have a lot of newcomers. And while it's great to get rid of centralized databases, that means that when people are trying to phish and socially engineer, they're no longer going after the enterprises and the databases, they're going after the individual. So if you don't have individuals who are particularly literate or know what they're doing, they become easy targets. And I mean, we've seen this in Web3. Phishing is a huge issue, scams are a huge issue. It's just that tends to be for fungible assets. What happens when they're coming for your data and they can actually imitate you in a lot, I guess, more complex scenarios like, you know, taxes, government benefits, things like that.
I think it's important to note as well that this isn't a solution that's going to cure all of the problems in the world. It's like it's
What?
like
Wait.
no. Listen, it's like
That's not what we agreed before this panel.
but it's like this. Like people are looking like, oh, put everything on chain, solve everything with it, just tokenize everything. It will all work out. And it's like, well, Facebook started from really pure intentions, and they're not now. Like straight up.
Yeah.
So it's like this isn't for me. This isn't about just delivering another type of dictatorship on how we should all use this. It's just about giving choice to every single individual user on how they want to use something. So it's just about allowing that two-way street between a business and a person to be able to have that decision-making behind them, because right now we don't have no power of decision.
And this is sometimes where you've got the challenge of technology is developing faster than the institutions that are designed to regulate it are able to regulate it. Using Facebook as an example, we never thought Web 2 would erode the ability of our democracies to function when we started sharing pictures on it.
I saw it coming, man.
Yeah. And now you've kind of got this new technology, new applications. You know, we can literally do as much as we can go and imagine with it, but we haven't really thought necessarily about the unintended consequences of it as we go through. And that's always the scariest thing. And I kind of go back to as well to that learning challenge that people have as they're coming on to Web3. When you're in a workplace and they were teaching you how to use the CRM, they always gave you the dummy system first. You didn't go putting the data in straight away. Now you're going into a system where you're learning it. It's like, oh my God, every mistake you've made is already recorded on there, and that's transparent to everyone.
So we only have about 3 minutes left, and I guess we'll leave it on. I mean, clearly, I'm a strong advocate that I think that the front end is going to look like a data wallet. And I have a lot of underpinning in product and product research, which has informed why I think that data wallets are the solution, because data wallets kind of let you store very disparate sets of data that can also then leverage basically Web3 infrastructure to create relationships across stakeholders that we couldn't previously do in a permissionless and trustless way. However, it's not necessarily the only way that the front end could manifest with Web3 and identity. Do you guys have any insights as to how you think it might look?
I'll just jump in. So for the past 3 years, we've just been building an identity solution for Web3 crypto. Like I said, I come in the space in 2017. And then onwards from that, we've just been building loads of different blockchain tech around that. So the way we envision having a digital identity is that we are creating hyper-realistic digital twins to act as your counterpart in a digital world. So think about this as just one app, one place you go. You have a virtual self of you that holds everything in one place. The avatar can go into metaverse plays, the gaming plays, all the plays that has really been spoke about since Facebook announced Meta, like all of these digital worlds. But it's a very front-facing, enjoyable thing, and it's creative with no line of code that you need to understand a wallet transfer. And I think it's important to understand that that is not all Web3 right now, because it can't be. Hello. It can't be, but the slow onboarding process from Web 2 to Web 3 will take time, and I think it's important that people pushing out these front ends should have a balance initially. Because it's like this play, right? We're early to this. We can't just onboard the whole world as it is now. It's a slow process of brands slowly introducing new features, but making it fun for everyone at the same time.
Grab your tinfoil hats because I'm going on a ride. So based on that digital twinning, when you're kind of looking at the evolution of that and cognitive digital twinning, you know, can we create algorithms that are based on the way that you think, the way that you act? You know, you could have a business that's entirely yourself, built on blockchain, where you go, oh, it's just an algorithm of me repeated over and over and over again. That's the way that I see it when it starts to go far-flung. We start thinking about how we're capturing all of this data and what it could mean for how we operate within a society when we've got AI, Web3. It's this convergence of all of these technologies at the same time, which are all interchangeable and interoperable, which has some really interesting insights of how our societies will be structured.
Yeah, I think the wallet is, to me, the ideal analogy. I mean, if you look at trend lines and other things we do, right? Like, you have swipe cards, we pay with our phones for everything at this point, but that's always financial. It's not the other part, right? So I still have to go on my wallet and fish out my driver's license, right, to get into a club or something, right? Like whatever it's going to be. So I imagine a wallet is probably more of a gateway. It's where the analogy is. It's like where we keep all our stuff, right?
Love to hear that.
Yeah. So I don't really have a better metaphor for where your digital identity is going to live. The only other place I think is the browser, which seems like another primary interface into the world these days. So
A plugin that you could link
that's-
to a
but that's
digital
still, yeah,
data
still,
wallet.
Still the same way, right? Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, all right. Thank you so much. We're out of time, and it was great to have us NFT London. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.